And so when we were all kind of lined up in Mahan Hall with the piano and plinking away, I heard people like hitting 2 notes and getting asked to leave, and hitting 2 or 3 notes and getting asked to leave. And I got in there and I thought that was the normal. He goes, so sing, whatever it is he had to sing. I think it was America the Beautiful or something like that. And I start singing it, and I get 2 notes into it, and I'm like looking at him like, well, aren't you going to kick me out of the room now? And no, keep going, keep going. Right, exactly. And then he would change the key. Well, hey, now sing it this way. So I was in there like 5 minutes with this guy. Do this scale. Sing this for me.
Yeah.
And little did I know he was trying to find where the bottom of the range was. I'm more a natural baritone, but he needed bass singers. So I could hit most of the bass notes. And so the next thing you know, I was singing bass.
Welcome to the Courage Never Quits podcast, where members of the West Point class of 1986 tell their stories. I'm your host, Paul LaFontaine. My guest today is Ted Cummings, Cullum number 43072. We'll hear about Ted's adventures as president of the Glee Club to his years as a senior technology leader in the Army Reserve. As always, the views expressed in this podcast are those of the participants, not of West Point, the Army, or any government organization, most particularly the U.S. Army Reserve. Ted Cummings, welcome to the podcast.
Glad to be here.
It's such a pleasure having you here. You're coming to us from Virginia, is that right?
The city of Fairfax, Virginia, not to be confused with the county.
Now that means you've gone completely full circle, because you hail from Springfield, Virginia.
My marriage license is from the courthouse a half a mile down the road, and we had no idea we'd end up living here, 20 years plus or so later. So yes, I grew up in Springfield.
You are a hometown boy who's made good.
Well, as an Army brat, it's hard to call any place home, but Northern Virginia was the most frequent stop in my travels.
Talk about being an Army brat. What was the experience? What did your parent do, and what happened?
Yeah, no, it was fantastic. My father was an infantry officer. He graduated from Fordham University in 1960. My mother graduated from Fordham University in 1960, but they never met each other at Fordham University. They met each other at Jones Beach the summer they had graduated, and they were each dating another person. And after that date, they asked to date the other person. So my dad ended up marrying his Army buddy's date at the time, my mother, and my dad's friend ended up marrying my dad's date, and they both had long, multi-decade marriages, and so it's a funny story that they share.
That works.
But I lived all over the world.
Yeah,
went to 9 schools. So being an Army brat was really cool until high school. Going to 3 high schools was a bit of a drag, but I was born in Okinawa, so that made doing birth certificates and secret clearances a lot of fun in my Army career, trying to find the report of birth abroad. And we lived in places like North Carolina and Georgia and Louisiana, and fun places like Argentina and Panama and Northern Virginia, as I mentioned. Panama was probably my favorite. Panama was 7th, 8th, and 9th grade, and my parents believed in free-range parenting, and so I often would get up in the summer when we were out of school, and I would grab a peanut butter and jelly sandwich and a machete, and I would go into the jungle, and I would catch minnows. We had little mini hooks with cheese on it. That was the best bait to catch minnows. And I would just catch a bucket full of minnows, and I'd come back up to the house, and I'd grab a Coke, a nice healthy Coke, and then trudge down to this cayuca, which is a wood-hewn canoe, basically, at a dock my parents had. And I would canoe out to Lake Gatun all by my lonesome and fish for most of the afternoon. And it was bass. The lake was all full of bass. And so very fat bass, too. You can imagine the amount of insects they had available to eat. Right. So I got into water sport, so I could snorkel and scuba dive. It was actually an underage PADI certificate. The guy I had my birthday, I think, 2 weeks after I got my certification, but the guy was like, yeah, okay, you're certified. So, I mean, I think the first time I realized, this is a jungle, was when a panther, literally a black, beautiful, but extremely spooky looking panther, walked in front of the path I was on, and I I'm very fortunate that this particular wild beast had probably already eaten something because I was probably a pretty attractive morsel for a beast like that.
So your dad, an infantry officer, didn't go to the academy, but
Yeah.
what was your pull to go to the academy?
Oh, he was actually a great dad in terms of not pressing, right? So he was, he had probably every accolade you could get. He's infantry and ranger and special forces and regular Rambo. When we were cadets and that movie was popular, I was like, oh, that's my dad. But he didn't look like a snake eater. He just was, and it's fantastic. But no pressure. I was the oldest of 5, so about the only pressure, and I've heard others mention this, the advantage of no tuition. But so I applied, and I did not get in. I did not make it into the academy the first time I applied. I graduated from high school in 1981. Okay. And ended up going to Fordham University. So I kind of knew Fordham from my parents and going up to games there. So I ended up going up to Fordham University, and the Jesuits, cracked my skull open and massaged my brain and made me a good writer that allowed me to validate out of cow English. But I did not get in the first time. And so it made it a little bit interesting when I did get in the second time I applied. And that's the challenge of living in Northern Virginia. My parents lived in Springfield. I think that was the 11th Congressional District. There's only about 300 people that apply for, 2 appointments. So, it kind of goes without saying it's a challenging district to try and get an appointment out of. But I ended up getting very lucky. I think Senator Byrd had a kind of a leftover appointment, and it got thrown my way. So I found out on tax day. I called my parents. I had income I worked all through high school, so I had some income and interest, and I had to do my income taxes. So I'm calling on, April 5th to figure out where to send my EZ form in. And so I dial up the call, and it's expensive back then. This was, 82, spring, April of 82. And so it was a very expensive call. Middle of the day, of course, I called right before the post office closed. And my mom's like, oh, I've got big news. I'm like, Mom, tell me tonight sometime. I need the address. She looks up the address. She gives me the address. She goes, well, I'll look forward to talking to you later tonight, sweetie. You got into West Point. Click. so I call her back right away. I'm like, what do you say? And so needless to say, walking to the post office, and I'm sure everyone has this moment where they get the announcement and suddenly they're like, holy cow, it's real. Am I going to be ready for this? This is while I'm at Fordham, right? I had, shoulder length hair, long curly hair, and I had holes in my jeans, and I had holes in my shoes because I skateboarded all over the grounds there to get around campus. So I actually didn't, I thought I wasn't going to go, actually. I had the appointment letter, and I had 2 professors write my recommendation letter. One was my philosophy professor, and the other one was my theology professor, who's Father John Baldwin. And so I felt compelled to tell them all that their letters had worked, and I had gotten the appointment. And but I told them, I go, yeah, I'm really thinking, especially Father Baldwin, who was a fantastic professor. And I said, I'm not sure I want to go. And he goes, well, when do you have to be there? And I said, well, 1 July. He's like, well, we don't start our semester until September, so just go, try it out. If you don't like it, just show up in September. We won't be any the wiser other than your short hair. and that way you don't kick yourself for not having tried it.
What great and pragmatic advice that was.
Yeah. Oh no, it was super. But the other sneaky thing he did, and I find this funny after the fact, is he goes, do you play tennis, Ted? And I go, well, no, not really that well. I played a little of it in Panama and growing up. But he goes, well, I'm trying to pick up the sport. How about you play with me every Thursday morning? And I'm like, okay, sure, Father. Now, the wisdom in that is Wednesday night at Fordham University was the wine and cheese, or it was really just kegs of beer getting tapped and a lot of drinking and a lot of games of quarters. And so the wisdom of that move is he would schedule our tennis matches for like 7 a.m. and I'd be sitting there on Wednesday night going, hey guys, I gotta go. I gotta get up at 6 a.m. to go play tennis with Father Baldwin. And so he got me, he got me out of the risky aspect of doing something stupid that could cause you to lose the appointment, right? Getting into a drunken brawl or, having a brain fart or something. So,
Yeah, right.
So I thought that was another sneaky way he was kind of getting me, a little bit more physically fit than I otherwise would have been at Fordham.
So having a year of college, your dad being in the Army, how do you think that prepared you for the experience, or did it?
Well, certainly. Oh no, it both did. Probably more Fordham than my dad. My dad was just the culture and the ethos of the officer corps, and seeing how close the relationships were with his battle buddies from Vietnam and his command group. I mean, we were holding socials all the time back in the day. And so there were always little receptions and little get-togethers and bridge parties and book club, whatever. My mom was a big, she was a good first lady, let's put it that way. So I enjoyed seeing the closeness of the relationships of the officer corps and truly how much they cared about their soldiers. I mean, I know we like to put these divisions out there, but my dad, really adored his NCOs and always had funny stories about his soldiers. So I'd just say that was the contribution my dad gave, which is important, but not nearly as much as being confident in my own skin. I mean, when you have a year at college, I was paying a lot of the bill. I had worked all through high school, like I mentioned, and so I was paying a lot of my book bills and paying for my own groceries and paying for my own restaurant tabs and beer tabs and all that stuff. So I knew how to be responsible and get up at the time I needed to get up and show up in class and ask for help when I needed to ask for help. And really probably the biggest thing is just not being homesick. I got all that out of the way, right? I was plenty homesick
right.
for the first couple of weeks at Fordham, but you get past that and, so at the academy that I had no kind of homesickness.
So what was the moment that you made the decision to not leave and go back to Fordham? I mean, there had been a moment where you just said, okay, I'm in. When did that happen?
This is going to sound really stupid, but I loved Beast Barracks. I mean, I was just looking at a picture of my Beast Barracks squad in front of the Huey, and I'm the goofball, hey, this is great, And, everyone else has got the proper butt face on, and I'm sitting there like right in front of the Huey going, oh, this is the stuff, so.
Once you were you were in, there was no question.
Well, in fact, I would tell my classmates this because I was surrounded through the whole academic year by folks going, oh, what's a real college like? What's a real college like? And I would tell them I accomplished more in the opening weeks of Beast Barracks than I accomplished in the entire academic year at Fordham. You're just doing so much. The sheer volume of activity and new experiences and meeting new people, forced or unforced, was volumes higher than Fordham. I have drinking buddies from Fordham. I have friends from Fordham. I don't have classmates the way we think of classmates. And so it was very different experience.
Okay.
But and I ended up being on a checklist. My tactical officer ended up adding my name to the bottom of the checklist of anyone who wanted to leave the academy. They had to see me because they would talk about real college. And why did I apply the first time to the academy? And it was because I was the paper boy for the Normandy housing area at Fort Bragg, and there was a grad, General Klein. I think he was class of 54. One of his sons, Rich Klein, I think was class of 87 or 88. He came to the academy. But I was collecting the 450 for the Fayetteville Observer Times, and Teddy, where are you going to school? And I'm like, I'm a sophomore. I have no idea where I'm going to school. And he goes, well, have you considered the academy? I'm like, the academy? Like, which academy are you talking about? The military academy. I go, well, I know quite a few graduates that are customers. General Graves, whose son Greg ended up coming to the academy, was a customer and who passed away too early in life. And so I knew of academy grads, and they all had the crest up, and you kind of knew who the ring knockers were in the community. But he actually took the time to say, hey, look, go eat some dinner and come back at like 7 o'clock and we'll talk. And I came back. I was friends with his sons. They were twins. And And they were mortified that their father was pimping me for the academy. But he had all his swag out. He had uniforms and howitzers and pictures, and so he piqued my interest. He actually one, he thinks I could qualify, so that was a real boost, right? And then I don't know, maybe a month or two later, they did the appointment letters in the school gymnasium, right, where folks who had received an appointment were called up on stage and given their appointment certificate, which in some high schools they do, some high schools they don't. But in mighty Reed Ross High School in Fayetteville, North Carolina, they did that tradition. And I remember, I believe it was Jim Drago, his brother John served at the academy, but Jim Drago and Bob Wilkinson were two guys I really looked up to. They were seniors. I was just this schmuck sophomore. But they couldn't have been more different. Jim Drago was this, good-looking Italian guy, had all the girls' football captain, right. Just, in the three legs of the stool, he was like the athlete and the leader, right? And then there's Bob Wilkinson, who was more like the quiet professional, but academically very smart and very athletic, but not kind of out there. He was just a little more reserved. And I thought, wow, this same school is getting, two different personalities, but two guys I really admired and thought highly of. And that's where I got serious about, trying to tailor what I did at school to make a go.
What was it that got you in on the second go? So you didn't get in the first time. What got you in?
I think just the luck of an extra appointment floating around because to be honest with you, we didn't move. It's not like I went to a different district. It's just actually I should mention, because I contribute to it, is the AOG offered me a scholarship at Fordham. So my week or two before I entered Fordham, I got a letter in the mail that said the association graduates would like to offer you a partial scholarship. They offered it to 10 people. I found out I was within 4 people of getting in. The guy said, I can't tell you that. And I go, come on, tell me how close I was so I can see if I want to do it again.
Right. And
he goes, well, we offered to 10 people. I go, so what's my number? And he goes, you were 4. You were 4 away from getting in.
Okay.
And so, that was like, wow, okay. I was pretty close. And so that, I will say that also compelled me to be pretty critical of any of the classmates who had to approach me on the checklist of wanting to leave. I go, there was some schmuck who wanted to go in here, and you're saying you want to go because you want to go to a real college? Well, let's talk.
How would you find the plebe experience post Beast in I2?
A completely different experience. Reorg week kicked my ass. I was an unassigned plebe, which meant I did everything, but I couldn't be a specialist. So I look up at the roster, and there's maybe 1 or 2 of us that were not a minute caller, not a laundry carrier, not a mail carrier. We were unassigned, which means that at any moment I needed to pitch in delivering laundry or call the minutes. And so I was just thrown right into the shitstorm. It was always last minute. Cummings, we need someone to call minutes for lunch. And I'm like, shit, I was just delivering laundry, so
I'd never actually considered that when you were unassigned, you just by being a good classmate, you had to do everything.
And I was always the second damn person for the job that entered the room. So the first mail carrier comes in, drops off all the 4 C's. I get this, the mail carrier comes, I can't find the mail carriers. Can you deliver this 4C? Well, sure. And I get all dressed off and squared away, and I go knocking on the door, pinging in. Who the hell are you? Sir, I'm Cadet Cummings, Why are you in here? Sir, I do not understand the question. like I'm like, I'm delivering the mail, you idiot. And he's like, well, you're the second person to come in here. Get the head mail carrier. So I'd go ping down the hall, find the head mail carrier, and then the 2 of us would come in and do every piece of plebe poop there was in the book before dinner and come out to just beating with sweat. And then the misdirected laundry was the funniest. Someone was, I forget who it was who was talking about the D1 or the first reg, Old South Barracks, so the vertical living, right, in the divisions. And I got a misdirected laundry for D1. And I've shared this story with Craig Collier, who was in D1 as a plebe. And I get a very good dress off, but we were in Bradley short. So I do the gauntlet down our own 5 flights of stairs, whoop it, whoop it, whoop it, whoop. I go pinging across central areas, best at 120 per I could. And I enter, the barracks area there. And like right off the bat, I didn't square the right side of the walkway. I didn't smack. The big deal was I didn't smack. D1 apparently smacks against the wall in the stairwell. So I'm going thump, 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 good afternoon, sir. They're like, Mr. Halt. And I spent 30 minutes in the D1 vertical just delivering someone's, white shirt back to them. I'm like, oh, God. So, no, I did not have a great experience in Reorgy week, but that ended up making me a really good plebe cadet. So after the first couple of weeks of just ungodly, plebe poop and just being a marching cadet, I didn't do any Corps Squad sports or anything like that. I got to be real good at the routine, right? The only piece of poop that concerned me the most was the days. The days was, I think, everyone's dreaded plebe poop. But it was a good company. There was a couple of hazes, a guy named Ken Dyson from 84. I can name names with him because he ended up being in my unit in Germany.
Okay.
And, I see him there and he's smoking a cigarette and he's the S1 or something. And Ken's like, hey, Cummings. I go like, you're an asshole. I hadn't seen him since, 84 when he graduates. And he was just laughing. Yeah, I was an asshole, So John and I are out there in the hallway going through every piece of plebe poop. We're doing real well. The squad leader's feeling good that he doesn't have a bunch of duds. And Cormier comes out of the room in his flip-flops going to take a shower. Flip-flop, flip-flop, facing movement, flip-flop, flip-flop. Goes by the hallway, flip-flop, flip-flop, goes, takes a quick shower, comes back. And we're just cracking up because if you can just imagine this audio soundtrack, here comes Cormier again, flip-flop, flip-flop. So he changes real quick, comes back out in the hallway, and then just starts screwing up by the numbers. Just the basics. What's for dinner? Like, hey, it's not that. Who's the OIC? Third. Third, I do not know. And so, as you can imagine, that was going over like a lead brick. And for some reason, John and I thought it was fun. We got the giggles. We had been out there. We were pretty tired, a little bit nervous, a little on edge, and something our classmate Mike said. And, maybe he said something goofy on how's the cow, but whatever it was, we suddenly got the unstoppable giggles. And that, Ferris, he was kind of cool with it, but Dyson, who was the flame I was talking about, came exploding out of the room, talking about how we were dicking our classmate. And we didn't mean to laugh at him, but it was just something, we were just nervous giggles. And oh my goodness, we got hazed so bad.
By the way,
we started so strong.
Ted, you get the gold star for bringing back on the podcast the memory of pinging and flip flops. I haven't thought about that for.
Not to mention the soap dish. You got to have that soap dish at a 90-degree angle too, right? And the towel draped over the arm. Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Stuff.
Anyway,
so you got through that year, and then you ended up heading to F4.
The Fighting Frogs. Oh, hold on. This is my cue. I want to.
There it is.
There we go. I'm ready.
The Fighting Frogs.
That's
really
the Fighting Frogs. The F4 Fighting Frogs were a great bunch of classmates. It was vertical living though. For 3 years I was in the 45th Division. Yeah. Nowadays they're in the Lost 50s, and I-4 is where we were. But I was in the 45th Division and was there all 3 years. And so it is kind of funny. I've got company mates who I didn't interact with all that much because they were over in the 43rd Division. I was in the 45th, and they spent 3 years in the 43rd. I spent 3 years in the 45th, and we'd see each other at formation. We'd see each other in the day room and at class events. But in terms of socializing, it was all vertical isolation.
Right.
So, and we didn't have the best view. If you got one side, you got a gorgeous view of North Area. If you had the other side of the building, you were looking at the algae-covered, seeping walls of granite that started the Ho Chi Minh Trail. So it's,
I remember it
either
well. Way. And what was your course of study as an upperclassman? What caught your interest?
I took foreign area studies, Soviet Union, because I remember my dad talking about, actually it was General Klein said, why do you want, the first question he asked me as a person he was recruiting, like he invites me over and he goes, so why do you want to be an officer in the United States Army? And I hadn't thought of the long game. I was like, why do I want to be a cadet? You're here to convince me why I want to be a cadet.
Right.
And he was like, well, why do you want to be an officer? And I'm like, I hadn't, that's an excellent question. And so I had that front of mind when I didn't have any particular hankering to do math or science. That was my weak area. I was a Ranger math guy. The Jesuits were very strong on critical thinking and writing and communications, not so much on the math classes. So whatever credits I freed up by validating out of Cow English, I had to spend in math. And so I took Russian all 3 years there. And
area studies. You're the first person on the podcast with that major. What was the what was the structure of that, or what did you study?
Yeah, so it was obviously the language. You had to take the language of the foreign area you were studying. You would take the geography of the class of the region you were studying. You would study the politics of that. It was really it was a great kind of FAO prep. But I was firmly in the houseplants and animals world.
Yeah,
I was not an MSc guy. Yeah. What
was an example of a time where you just looked around and said, it's just awesome being a West Point cadet?
For me, it was the coolest part of being cadet was I was very active in the Catholic choir plebe year and then in the Glee Club, the upper class years.
Glee Club for 3 years.
Yes, I was very active in the Glee Club. I was the
when did you discover
secretary.
You were a singer? Was that a high school thing, or was that something that you?
Yeah, music is a big part of our family. All my family are kind of music nuts. We're those kind of parents that pop quiz our kids in the car. Whenever a classic 80s song comes on, we need them to know these classic rock songs. Yeah. But I started singing at church. So Holy Spirit Catholic Church right across from Kings Park. Had a folk group. Some of my friends who were in marching band were active in that. And so I started using my voice. And so I started singing there. And so when we were all kind of lined up in Mahan Hall with the piano and plinking away, I heard people like hitting 2 notes and getting asked to leave, and hitting 2 or 3 notes and getting asked to leave. And I got in there and I thought that was the normal. He goes, so sing, whatever it is you had to sing. I think it was America the Beautiful or something like that. And I start singing it and I get 2 notes into it and I'm like looking at him like, well, aren't you going to kick me out of the room now? And no, keep going, keep going. All right, exactly. And then he would change the key. Well, hey, now sing it this way. Yeah. So I was in there like 5 minutes with this guy. Do this scale. Sing this for me.
Yeah.
And little did I know he was trying to find where the bottom of the range was. I'm more a natural baritone, but he needed bass singers. So I could hit most of the bass notes. And so the next thing you know, I was singing bass. So all the cadet songs, national anthem, all that stuff. I don't know the melody line. I know the bass line.
Right.
I can sing the bass line of all those songs. I will take, look, I got teased for being Ted. The only school in the country where my Ted is a derogatory term for geek. So I felt compelled to join the Glee Club. And heck, in a close election with Jerry Schwartz, Jerry was the vice president of the Glee Club and I was the president of the Glee Club. So that got omitted in my howitzer entry, but if
that's kind of a big deal.
Yeah, well, it was, you were asking me the initial question, like, where did it feel good to be a cadet? When we were on,
yeah,
and we were hitting the right notes and the right, if we were doing a good performance, oh my goodness, it was beautiful. It was beautiful. But the best performance we had, and we peaked at the right time, was when we went out to Pasadena. Mm-hmm. They hosted the Navy Chorale and the West Point Glee Club together with a bunch of stars, and and we treated it like a competition. So we went first. Navy went second. So Navy's kind of sitting behind the curtain waiting for us to get off the stage. And the last song we finished was the Battle Hymn of the Republic.
Yeah.
And we did, oh my God, such an amazing rendition of that. It was amazing.
Yeah.
I can remember our director, his name was Bill Cosby. That is his name, or was his name. Sadly, he passed. But Bill, because we're facing him. He's directing us. and we could see him. He's like, he literally mouthed the words, "Oh my God," because of the sound we were making, and it was beautiful.
That's great.
And the curtains close, and we're all like, "Wow!" We're high fiving, and we're singing at attention like a bunch of Glee clubbers.
That's fantastic.
And we totally broke attention and started high fiving. Well, little did we know that they opened the curtain for an encore. So the curtain starts opening up, and we're all doing this, back to attention. And so there were some very special performances where the practice paid off. There's even the way we sang the alma mater. Our alma mater is an amazing piece of music.
It's an amazing piece,
and you can't get to that last. I mean, especially if we would sing all these performances for grads all around the country because they were our sponsors. Yeah. We never stayed in hotels for the most part. We would be sponsored by families. So we would get farmed out to a lot of families who were trying to convince their kids to become cadets. So that was part of the recruiting effort too.
Yeah.
But when you're facing a bunch of older grads and you see tears in their eyes because we would have them all stand up as graduates in the audience. It was, that's an amazing piece of music as well. Yeah.
So your dad was infantry. Why aviation? Yep. What was it about aviation that caught your eye?
Well, it was the new branch, right? It started in 1983, and so a lot of the the HUA speeches and news coming out of the Army was this brand new branch called Army Aviation. And the Apache is out, the Black Hawk was out. Those airframes caught my imagination. You also had you had just. I think we're all pretty competitive, and that was a pretty competitive branch to get in. Someone actually, I think that might have been RD. They were talking about, the big disqualifier was eyesight, and you can see I'm wearing my Teds. Well, these are slightly better than Teds, but I did not pass the flight physical first year, and I'm like, oh, I cannot believe I'm not going to be able to go aviation. He goes, yeah, I'm sorry, your eyesight, you're 20/25.
Wow.
And I go, well, that's so sad. I mean, because I so enjoyed soloing, 2 years ago, because I'd gone to the 15-hour little flight school rotation and soloed in the mighty TH-55 helicopter. And the guy goes, oh, hold on. You passed a flight physical before? And he starts looking through his paperwork. And I'm go, yes, sir. I flew 15 hours. I got the little solo wings. He goes, oh, yeah. You're good. And I'm like, what? And he goes, you passed a Flight 1 physical already. You only have to pass a Flight 2 physical. And that doesn't require the eyesight to be 20/20.
See?
So that's what saved me.
And if you weren't a talker, you wouldn't have talked your way out of that one. See?
Right. I would have been going infantry. Infantry was my number 2. And I was dreading telling my dad, I'm like, oh boy, hey Dad, I got aviation. And he was thrilled, because of the close relationship infantry had with aviation in Vietnam. He thought they were crazier than infantry because they had their butts up in the air, a couple feet easy targets kind of thing. And but he's like, hey man, you were the guys who got us out. You were the guys who brought us fire. You evacuated our wounded and our casualties. No, you guys, aviation is the shit with me. So that was kind of nice to have your Rambo father say, I give you my blessing on that.
You were president of the Glee Club, and that's a big deal.
Of course. Actually, I kid you not, when I joined the Glee Club, my GPA really started to dip because of the level of activity.
It's like giving you credit, it's like Core Squad. A huge amount of energy goes into the practices and the travel and all that. So
we had practices twice a week, and we were doing a ton of travel, and I was an officer in the club. So if you get a chance to talk to Jerry as well, anyone who was doing a role in these clubs. In fact, it was my roommates loved me first year because I had a Class A phone because I was the president of the club, and they were coordinating trips all the time. So so I was right in the middle of the class. I'm a star man, but my star is on the inside of my gray jacket. I had to go to STAP for probability and statistics. It's still a mystery to me. I had a B going into the final, and they could never produce the final exam. I asked for the final, like, how did I fail so badly? That they could never produce the exam. And I was at Lake Frederick doing the Boy Scout Jamboree. I was supporting the Boy Scout Jamboree. And so I'm already enjoying my summer leave, supporting the Jamboree, and I hear this announcement from Cadet Cummings, report to the head shed, you're late for class. And I'm like, well, all right, this is some prank. And I go walking up to the orderly room at Lake Frederick, and I'm like, hey, what did I do? Did I, leave my lockbox unlocked? What's going on? No, you're late for class. You're in probability and statistics. You're in STAP.
Really?
And I'm like, are you kidding me? You talk about a depressing deuce and a half ride back through the Washington Gate.
That's a tough one.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Oh.
So here I am getting the key to the locker room, pulling out my summer uniform and my CRC and my TI 58C or whatever the hell the calculator was.
Because basically,
my notebook.
STAP just pulled out of your free time, like any leave you had.
Oh yeah. It screwed my summer up.
It wasn't like you missed training. It was like, okay, you're in STAP, so therefore you get no leave.
Exactly. So I was now here's the other funny thing. I was a Beast 1 squad leader. I felt so bad for those guys because I was one pissed off Beast 1 squad leader.
Is that what your howitzer entry has a lot about your Beast antics?
Oh, I think
you were just grumpy because you had to go to STAP.
Well, it was also the moniker we had. So Lou Irwin was our platoon sergeant.
Right.
I was one of his squad leaders. And Lou had this shtick where he would get up in front of the platoon and go, I am the devil. And the whole platoon would go, hell yeah, sir. So I think he refers to me as Hell's Angels. That's what the squad leaders were, I think, nicknamed.
Okay.
So when I had Lou write my entry,
okay,
so most of the references we had were Beast together and roomies together. Yeah.
Well, you got through probability statistics somehow because here you sit with that flying shirt on. So and you flew.
I kicked ass the second time around. It was great. And now I also believe in some providence here. So Father Matt Polakowski will back me up on this one, but there are reasons for things. And while they never produced the final exam, and we talked about Colonel Renegal. I think we talked about Hope Donnelly, and I'll fill in a little bit more, but he served with my father in Panama.
Okay.
And so I knew Colonel Renegal back when he was Lieutenant Colonel in Panama. He was on the academic review board. So anyone who fails a class goes in front of an academic review board. He's like in there making the case for why I should remain a cadet. Well, this is the first class he failed, yada, yada, yada. So, yeah, I made it through, and he spoke on my behalf.
The graduation, going to fly helicopters. How did you find, you did the 15-hour start. How did you find actually the training and being a helicopter pilot?
Yeah, so that's kind of like going to college for a year. When you do the 15-hour picking up to a hover, you're making an immediate first impression in flight school because you can pick up to a hover right away. So I had this chain smoking. I think all the IPs, the instructor pilots, were all chain smokers.
Right.
And if you ever watch a video of someone learning to hover, you can understand why they're all needing to, get some nicotine in their system. But he was just smiling ear to ear when I picked it up and nailed it, and it's like riding a bike. I'm like, okay, and now what? And he goes, let's go fly. And so for me, that was a huge confidence boost. And so I could focus more of my energies and time on, studying for the daily questions and the emergency procedures and all that stuff, where a lot of folks were dealing with the first week of just, almost dying a couple of times trying to figure out how to hover over the grass. Yeah.
So you served 11 years on active.
11 years active duty and 19 years in the reserves. So I did 30 years. I retired in 2016. I actually did 10 active duty. You fast forward 9 years, and then I got deployed in the 19th year. So the Army has a sense of humor. I got my retirement eligibility letter while I was deployed to Iraq. So I ended up, I retired as a colonel in the reserves.
What was your favorite job? I retired as a colonel. You had an amazing amount of experiences. What was your favorite job in the Army?
Yeah, so I had a fun career on the active duty side. And I know it sounds like a cliche, but command was a pain in the ass, but also very satisfying. And so I was a headquarters troop commander. Much to my chagrin, I was a headquarters troop executive officer in the CAV. And that was a large troop. We had a Stinger platoon, so there's 235 folks, which is odd for an aviation
Right.
unit. Proper aviation units are small. My platoon was maybe 30 people, or 30 people in the troop. There's maybe 15 or so in my Cobra platoon, 15 in the Scout platoon. It's small units, but highly specialized. You go over to the headquarters troop, you've got, the 3-5 platoon, you've got the cooks, you got everybody,
Yeah.
right? The gamut of humanity. The motor pool, 3-5 platoon, the ComSec folks, the arms room folks, the cooks, the staff, all that stuff.
Right.
And so, having survived the XO role there, when I got to Bragg, the squadron commander goes, "Oh, you were an HHT XO?" Yes, I was. And I was hoping to get some line troop side because HHT, you don't get a lot of flight time.
Right.
And he goes, no, you're my HHT commander. So the next thing you know is I'm commanding an HHT again. But that was a lot of fun. I enjoyed teaching ILE, or Command and General Staff College. That academic kind of platform adult learning model was a lot of fun because you're not teaching per se, you're facilitating a discussion. And then I enjoyed my last job. My last job was as the G6. So I was the CIO for a training command out of Fort Knox, Kentucky. I knew the combat training center environment, and I knew that learning modality. And so I was doing that in the reserves for the combat service support side of things at Fort Hunter Liggett, at Fort McCoy, and at Fort Dix, were our 3 division training divisions. Okay. And it was the G6 job. I was in the technology field. I was working for Dell at the time. And so I was right in my lane in my civilian world to give back on the military side. And I had
you thinking at a
great group of colonels.
Moving to the reserves, and what was going on there for that transition?
I almost left at the 12-year point. That civilian job became very, very challenging because we went away from being a strategic reserve to being an operational reserve. Mm-hmm. And so we were deploying. And we were getting ready for deployment. So you were training for deployment, not to backfill an active duty unit, but to actually do that role. So the reserve I started with had white collar executives, small business owners, high level executives in the commercial sector. As we started deploying more frequently in the op tempo, people started self-selecting out of the reserves.
Sure.
Because they couldn't afford to forego their practice or their business or really the pay that frequently.
I did not go in the reserves. I couldn't even imagine trying to keep those two worlds going,
Well, that's the trouble, right? So if you're, let's say you got, half your synapses are firing and you have a modicum of proficiency, you're going to get promoted in your civilian job and you're going to get promoted in the military. And you're always going to have this additional burden as both careers kind of pile on. So you almost have to, one of my mentors at the 12-year point, I foolishly told a guy named George Berbulis, a good friend of mine, and I said, I can't do this juggling act much longer. I was getting my master's degree at the University of Chicago. I had 2 young kids. I was in a sales role, so I had a lot of travel and sales work to do.
Yeah.
And I was doing this reserve gig as a field grade officer. And he narked me out to the 06. And that afternoon, the 06 drags me outside of the building, and we do a walk around the building. And he goes, "Hey, look, you're at 12 years, man. You could stand on your head for another 8. Get the retirement."
Yeah.
I'm telling you, the next 8 years are going to go so fast.
Yeah.
And thank goodness he did that. Thank goodness he took the time to do that, because it's so right. And we know this at the age we are now. We get in this weird time compression where things just happen so fast. Like my kids would start high school and I'd blink and they were graduating high school. I'm like, what the hell just happened? When I was younger, time seemed to go slower. But man, the 10 to 20 year point, or the 12 to 20 year point, the 20 to 30 year point, just you blink and the next thing you know, you're
8 years from that point looks very different than 8 years does.
Now, right? Yeah.
That's good. And it's those little interventions that are so key, right? So him doing that had a big impact.
Yeah, it was the deployment was a pretty important life experience. I'm not sure I on a personal level, it was gut wrenching to be away from my kids and my family, because in the reserves, you don't have as much of a support network. So my wife was the only wife in our civilian housing area, a subdivision that had a military service member, much less the deployed service member.
Right.
So there wasn't that kind of support network.
Well, get us up to date. Where did you meet your wife? And you have the two kids, at the time. Talk about your family. Get us up to speed.
I have the best story. I feel bad for my kids. I met my wife at church. Being a good Catholic boy, my first weekend in country, I was stationed in Fulda, Germany, with the mighty 11th Armored Cavalry Regiment. I show up at church at the chapel there on main post, and I see Mike O'Leary, who was in B4, and I was in F4. So we were always looking at the Wild West in our formation as we were saying, go Frogs Ribbit. They were saying, Wild West, yeehaw. Yeah. And so there's Mike O'Leary with his bride, and friendly face. I go sit over next to him, and I spot my wife with her mother over on the right-hand side of the chapel. And the next week, I go to the right-hand side, but adjacent to the O'Learys, and I wave at them. And then the next week, I'm right behind my wife. And then, as I like to say, my first words to my wife were, "Peace be with you," because I was right behind her. And she turned around, and I shook her hand. And she worked at the PX as a computer operator, and she worked at the deferred payment program counter as a substitute every once in a while.
Okay.
And I just fell totally in love with her. And we dated my entire tour there. And I was threatened with physical harm from a lot of the wives, Joanne Wylip, Roger Wylip's wife, Suzanne Trollin, who's Vince Trollin's wife, Mandy Jackson's, Sean Jackson's wife. All the spouses were aghast that I left Fulda without proposing to Sonia. And that probably was my most stupid move. I should have married her much sooner. But I ended up going. War had kicked off, Desert Shield, Desert Storm. I was showing up at the advanced course. I didn't want to make that kind of commitment if I was going to possibly get deployed. We didn't know how long it was going to be. So I go to the advanced course. It's over very quickly. Sonia comes to visit me because of Lou Irwin's wife. Lou Irwin's wife convinces Sonia to come visit me because she was sick of me. I had dated another girl at the advanced course, and Sonia was done with me.
You're a charmer, Ted. What can I say?
I'm such a catch. What a moron. Anyway, so Marcia convinces Sonia to go. I still don't propose to her. She visits for 6 weeks because Germans have all these great, vacation times. We had a great time at Mother Rucker. Dan Hokinson's wife Kelly was there. They had a lot of pool time with all the wives at the pool. All the wives, Sonia creates a whole new batch of friends that are pissed at me for not proposing to her.
And by this time, you have a whole.
The moment I knew,
adding angry at you.
Oh, gollies! The moment I knew I wanted to marry her was when I was saying goodbye to her at Hartsfield Airport in Atlanta. I dropped her off. She's crying all the way back because I'm done with this guy. He can't even propose to me now. And I'm calling up her parents, requesting her hand in marriage. I tell my parents I'm in love with Sonia and I'm going to marry her. So we're going on two different paths. Sonia's ready to write me off,
right.
And her father knows I'm going to propose the next time. And then I came over, and my dad on his birthday drives me to Dover. We sign up for the SpaceSafe flight. We drive up to Long Island. I pick up the engagement ring. We drive back to Dover. I catch my SpaceSafe flight, and I propose to her, I guess the next day out at the Schloss Fassanerie in Eichenzel, which is where our second date. She's my hero, and she did a great job when I was deployed. Not a peep of complaint, no drama, no
kids. You got 2 kids, you said?
Yeah.
2 children?
I have three children, 3 adult children, girl, boy. Yeah. I've got Teddy, who's a captain in the reserves. He's doing the juggling act right now. In the civilian world, he does the finances for a small company. I believe they're called APA.
Okay.
LLC. He handles a destroyer program for the Navy out at the Navy Yard.
Okay.
Shannon is a marketing manager at Carasoft, which is a reseller of software. They're actually the reseller of the companies I've worked for. The Carasoft has handled the contracts for us there. And she's doing great. And young Daniel, and I just got back from a Nats game today, and he's just graduated from Virginia Tech, and he is working for U.S. Soccer Federation. He's about to go do another gig in Atlanta, I guess, supporting them as a performance analytics guy.
Just in the interest of time, we're gonna have to get a summary of your civilian work. You're with MuleSoft.
Yeah, sure.
You went into technology. Was that a slow? Was the technology a slow ramp up while you were in the reserve and doing did you
No.
post Army thing?
Sonia started. This is not completely on Sonia, but Sonia was fine with me flying when we were dating, fine with me flying when we got married. We had our first child, and she started getting some real fears about me. And we were night flying. I was in a Kiowa Warrior squadron at Bragg, and so I was taking off at midnight and landing at 2 a.m. and getting home at 3:30 a.m. and she started wigging out at all the things that might have been going wrong on a night flight. So I had the opportunity of taking a functional area assignment in systems automation, functional area 53. And so that's exactly what I did. I finished command. I started going to class at Fort Gordon, Georgia. I'd commute. I left Teddy and Sonia up at Fayetteville in the house, the first house we had bought there on Cliffdale Road, and I would just commute down to Fort Gordon on Sunday night.
Where was this in your career, just so we can put it in context?
It was 94. This was 1994.
94.
So,
okay.
Yeah, so Teddy was born in May. I started that course in March of 94.
So you began your shift kind of 8 years in-ish.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
And then I did a functional area tour, and I was in charge of the Star Wars building, so I had all the fiber optic plant, all the AAR trailers, all of the AAR audiovisual equipment, all the computers that created
you were full on technology by this time then.
Yes. I was doing a systems automation officer role. I was the systems automation officer.
And what ranks were you as that you did that?
I was a captain. As
a captain, you switched into technology, and then that was the remainder, and you ended out as a colonel.
Yeah, and I ended up doing the VSI, right? I took the early retirement. I had an indication from branch that maybe not immediately, but maybe at lieutenant colonel, I might not make lieutenant colonel. I'm like, well, that's enough for me. I'm out. And I went straight, no break in service, right into the reserves at Fort Sheridan, Illinois. I started my civilian career at a company called Fujitsu, which I worked for 11 years.
Yeah.
They were a fantastic company.
All this from a guy who studied Russian.
I know. Thank goodness for the Fort Gordon experience. And,
you went to STAP, for gosh sakes.
I know. Well, I never told you why I thought it was Providence. The reason I thought it was Providence, I took it twice, is because when I did my combat tour in Iraq, I was in charge of information operations assessments.
Oh.
So I was pulling all these metrics for our PSYOPs and electronic warfare and creating the graphs we were doing effects-based operations. So I was doing all the measurements of whether we were creating the effect or not in the combat zone.
Yeah, there you go.
And so here I am explaining to generals, hey, that's not statistically significant, sir. We don't have enough data points.
Yeah.
And I was saying this with great confidence. Yeah.
That's brilliant.
So when Petraeus was briefing my charts for the surge in front of Congress, I was sitting there with a lemonade going, oh, that's a crappy metric, or, oh, that's a really good. I'm glad he's got that one in there.
Yeah, see?
So that was a great gig. But yeah, technology, I worked for Dell for a while. That was a good gig. I took care of the Pentagon. The Pentagon was a great customer. I had West Point as an account, and you might have seen my tradition there was I would invite all the West Point graduates who worked at Dell. So you had RD on recently. RD was invited up several times, and Terry Fong and others. And we would issue the laptops. All these old grads would issue the laptops to the cadets going through. So I saw a ton of our classmates' kids. I would buy them pizza and try and take care of them for the short time I was there.
That's great.
As the Dell rep for the academy. Yeah. So I worked for Salesforce for 9 years, but it's changed. I took a severance package from Salesforce in the August time frame. So I'm on a paid vacation from Salesforce. I start a new gig. You heard it here first.
Yeah.
I will be the Army account executive for a cybersecurity software solution from a company called Armis, ARMIS.
Oh yeah, I know Armis.
So
I know of it. Yeah.
So at the end of the month, I will be the Army rep for Armis.
Oh, good for you! Look at that, man. That's exciting.
So I'm going to try that startup experience. I'm working with a bunch of big companies now going for the smaller
thing. If you want to bounce ideas off me, give me a call. Not on your product and everything, but on when you know the thing's going down, because I've seen that.
Yeah, you got it. You got it.
Just call me and say, hey, is this an indicator that things aren't good? I can say now that's normal, or hey, that's a big red light. So let's talk.
Yeah.
We're hitting our 60th year. You're a little bit beyond that because you had that good Fordham experience. What
Yeah.
advice would you give yourself looking back kind of 20, 25 years to a younger version of yourself?
Yeah. Yeah. I've enjoyed that answer from most folks the most actually on the podcast. This for me, it would be exploring my faith a little more deeply. I have enjoyed in the last couple of years the internet has these long format interviews and some just fantastic resources for Bible study and for the Catholic faith. And I got hooked on Bishop Robert Barron. He does these wonderfully intellectually stimulating homilies and talks and so that I branched out from there. But I got so focused on the job and so focused on the military that I think if I had had a little bit more exploration of my faith, I would have recognized that I was not properly ordering my life. Right? I probably should have put my family and kids a little bit farther front. And so that's been a big joy for me these last couple of years, is just learning all the richness of being a Christian and the richness of the Catholic faith in particular, and how that changes the way you interact with people, your family and friends and coworkers. It would have served me well to have a little bit more balance in that regard earlier on.
Wise words, and good for you for finding it now. So I mean, you're obviously
yeah.
now, right? So
I'm lucky that I've lasted long enough to start to appreciate it.
So your 80-year-old self doesn't come through and give you a whack in the back of the head. Ted, it was great having you on the podcast. I really appreciate you coming on.
My pleasure. It was really fun.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Courage Never Quits podcast, where any member of the class of 1986 who is willing to tell their story will be a guest. To get the word out and to stay up to date on the latest episodes, hit the like and subscribe buttons. With 954 living graduates in the class, we have a lot of stories to collect, and you don't want to miss any of them. We'll see you in the next episode.